She shoved the contract in the 13-year-old boy's face and laughed. "If you can read this, I'll give you my company." Victoria Blackwood, the richest woman in the city, thought she was humiliating a simple janitor. But she didn't know that this boy in old sneakers held a secret that, in 5 minutes, would save her life and destroy her enemies. Watch until the end to see how a little genius put billionaires in their place. Victoria Blackwood's voice echoed through the grand ballroom of the Monarch Grand Hotel in the heart of New York. She held up a document written in Chinese. Laughter erupted like thunder. Every smirk was aimed at Leo Martinez, the young janitor holding a mop with trembling hands. Leo felt the ground give way beneath him. He had never been the center of attention, especially not in a room full of people in expensive suits and glittering jewelry. His gray work uniform, 2 sizes too big for him, felt like a mark of shame amidst the evening gowns and crystal glasses. There was no way out of this public humiliation. He had to respond. Victoria Blackwood smiled with self-satisfaction, certain he would remain silent, that he would shrink under the mockery. But Leo, breathing heavily and keeping his eyes fixed on the paper, took a deep breath. What had started as a cruel joke was turning into a duel that would be remembered for a long time. Glasses clinked and the fabrics of gowns shimmered in the hall when a low laugh cut through the air like the crack of a whip. Impeccably dressed, with a perfect hairstyle, Victoria Blackwood rapped her knuckles on the marble table. The executives at the table laughed obediently with her, echoing her tone. Before them stood Leo, motionless. His uniform still smelled of cheap soap and bleach. His hands were clasped, fingers trembling, his gaze lowered to his old, worn-out sneakers. He had only come in to collect empty glasses, but now he found himself in the merciless spotlight of others' ridicule. "Look at him," Victoria's voice boomed over the hall as she held up the contract. "Take a good look. Tonight, this pup has a chance to shine. If, of course, he can read anything other than the labels on cleaning solution bottles." Laughter once again swept over the table. David Channing, one of the top managers, slammed his glass on the tablecloth, nearly choking with laughter. Sophia, Victoria's young assistant, shifted uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding her boss's gaze. Leo pressed his lips together so tightly they turned white. He wanted to disappear, to fall through the floor, to become as invisible as the dust he cleaned. But his feet felt rooted to the cold marble. His breathing became shallow, as if each new burst of laughter stole the air from his lungs. Victoria leaned forward, smirking venomously. Her eyes, cold as ice, bored into the boy. "Go on, kid. Prove you're good for more than just mopping floors. Translate this contract right here, from Chinese to English. If you can do it, I'll give you $10,000 right now." A sudden silence fell, followed by another wave of laughter. The idea seemed so absurd that the guests took it as the perfect joke of the evening. Maria, another employee serving drinks, wanted to step in and defend the boy, but Leo gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. "Please, don't get involved." He knew that if she intervened, she would be fired too, and Maria had children of her own. His pride was wounded, but he still stood his ground. He lifted his head. His tired but intelligent eyes met Victoria's. There was pain in them, but no submission. "What if I try?" he whispered in a trembling voice. The laughter grew louder. David bent over with laughter, wiping tears with a napkin, and Victor Vance, the company's lawyer, adjusting his glasses, smirked in disbelief. Victoria Blackwood, enjoying the spectacle, tossed the contract in front of him. The slap of the paper on the table sounded like a challenge, like a slap in the face. "Go on, surprise us, if you can." Leo hesitantly reached for the document. The papers were heavy, thick. The lines were dense with complex legal characters that would be difficult even for a native speaker. His heart pounded in his chest like a caged bird, but his eyes began to scan the lines as if an old memory was awakening. The guests' whispers died down. Everyone was looking at the boy. This small, dirty janitor, whom everyone thought couldn't string 2 words together, was about to speak. Leo's chest rose and fell as he fought his fear. Victoria's firm voice cut through the silence again. "Well, come on, don't keep us waiting, or show everyone that you're as useless as we thought. Crawl back to your hole." Leo took a deep breath, His throat was dry, but the Chinese words began to form in his memory as if they had been dormant somewhere deep inside. The hall fell silent, as if it had stopped breathing. The contract lay on the table like a cursed object, thick with a red seal, looking more like a trap than a document. Everyone stared at him with grim fascination, waiting to see the janitor suffer the most humiliating defeat of his life. Victoria leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms like a satisfied empress. Malice glittered in her eyes. She was sure this evening would be remembered as her best joke at the expense of the common folk. "Just so we're all clear," she said, lifting her chin, "if this boy manages to translate every line of this Chinese contract right here, I won't just give him money. I'll appoint him as my personal consultant." Cruel laughter rolled through the hall again. David Channing applauded, as if the billionaire had told the best joke of the evening. Some guests even banged on the table with laughter. Leo stood motionless, pressing his fingers to the pages of the contract, feeling the heat of dozens of gazes. Every laugh pierced his chest like a needle. From a corner, Maria tried to catch his eye to support him, but Leo didn't raise his head. He knew if he showed weakness, all would be lost. Victoria didn't let up, leaning closer, enveloping him in the scent of expensive perfume. "Do you accept my challenge, or will you go back to your mops?" Leo struggled to swallow the lump in his throat. His throat was parched, but his lips trembled and uttered, with a resolve that surprised even himself, "I accept." Silence fell instantly, thick as smoke. The ticking of a clock somewhere far away was audible. The laughter ceased. The guests leaned forward, holding their breath. David's eyes widened. He couldn't believe the kid had dared to agree. Victoria raised an eyebrow, her smirk widening, confident the show was just beginning. "Excellent. Then start right now." She sharply pushed the papers toward him, and the pages scattered across the table. Leo took a deep breath, trying to calm his trembling hands. Every word in Chinese seemed like an insurmountable wall, but somewhere deep inside, a forgotten spark from his youth flickered to life. He remembered the years his father, a diplomat, had taught him the language. He remembered sleepless nights over textbooks. He couldn't afford to make a mistake now. Not this time. It wasn't just his pride on the line, but his mother's life. The murmur of the guests' voices rose again like a wave. Victor Vance muttered with a sneer, "Let's see what comes of this. The circus left, but the clowns stayed." Leo ran his fingers along the edge of the contract. The paper burned his palms, but his lips were already beginning to form the first words in Chinese. The guests leaned forward, impatiently waiting for a stumble, embarrassment, disgrace, anything that would confirm their belief in their own superiority. But as soon as he opened his mouth, Victoria raised her glass and mockingly commanded, "Quiet, everyone. I want to hear every word of this masterpiece. I want to hear what failure sounds like." The hall froze. The tension hung in the air, sharp as a razor's edge. Leo closed his eyes for a second, took a deep breath, and began to speak. He held the contract with both hands, as if it might crumble to dust at any moment. His fingers trembled so much that some guests thought he wouldn't utter a word. "Di," he said quietly, stumbling only at the beginning. The first bursts of laughter immediately followed. David Channing covered his mouth with a napkin, laughing so hard he could barely breathe, and a woman in a red dress whispered mockingly, "Poor thing, he can't even get the words out. What a disgrace." Leo pressed his lips together, took a deep breath, and tried again, this time more confidently. "Bien xie yi de mu di." The whispering in the hall ceased. Victor Vance raised his eyebrows. The pronunciation wasn't perfect, but it was clear and surprisingly accurate for someone everyone considered illiterate. It wasn't just a string of sounds, it was a real language. Victoria pretended to be bored and said dismissively, "Go on, boy, we've only just begun. Don't disappoint me." And Leo continued. The contract lay open on the table as his voice sounded again. It was gaining strength. "Shu wang quan juan rang gu quan," he pronounced, still trembling slightly but with growing confidence. The guests, who had expected him to fail immediately, began to exchange surprised glances. The laughter gradually subsided, giving way to a tense silence. Sophia leaned forward, her eyes wide. She had never seen Victoria mock someone so cruelly, and she certainly didn't expect her challenge to be met with such calm determination. In the corner, Maria gripped her tray tightly. Her lips silently whispered, "Hold on, Leo, hold on, you can do it." Suddenly, Leo looked up from the paper. He was no longer just reading. He was translating aloud without hesitation. This agreement between the parties is final and legally binding upon signing. The receiving party, hereafter referred to as the investor, shall gain full and unconditional control over the board of directors. An icy silence swept through the room. The Chinese words, which just a moment ago had seemed like comical babble to the guests, now sounded like a verdict. The humble janitor boy, who was considered a nobody, was doing what even the top managers feared. He understood what was written in the document that the fate of an empire depended on. David Channing stopped laughing. The sound of laughter got stuck in his throat, turning into an awkward cough. Victor Vance, the chief legal counsel, leaned closer, squinting, trying to catch a mistake in the boy's intonation, but found none. Victoria Blackwood crossed her arms over her chest and forced a smile, though a shadow of unease flickered in her eyes. "That's just the introduction," she said coldly, trying to save face. "Standard boilerplate. Let's see how long your little show lasts, kid." Leo lowered his gaze again, but now a fire burned in his eyes. He remembered the nights his father made him learn 50 new words while other kids played soccer. He remembered crying from exhaustion, and his father would say, "Knowledge is a shield." Right now, that shield was the only thing standing between him and humiliation. Each word he spoke seemed to restore a piece of his trampled dignity. The room was divided. Some were still waiting for him to slip up and be disgraced. Others were beginning to feel ashamed of their laughter. Sophia whispered, almost unconsciously, "Miss Blackwood, you should stop this." But she waved it away with a sharp gesture, not taking her eyes off the boy. "Be quiet, Sophia. The interesting part is just beginning." Leo spoke again. "Failure to comply will result in legal action before the International Court of Arbitration in Hong Kong," he translated from Chinese to English and then immediately into his native tongue. "Non-compliance with the terms will lead to legal proceedings in the International Arbitration Court of Hong Kong." Vance's eyes widened. This was not a simple phrase. It was a complex legal formulation about jurisdiction, and a 13-year-old boy had translated it flawlessly. A murmur went through the hall. The weight of humiliation began to slowly shift from the boy's shoulders to the shoulders of those who had laughed at him. Mr. Chen, the head of the Chinese delegation, abruptly set his glass on the table. The liquid spilled. He stopped smiling. He realized something was happening that was not part of the plan. Victoria was still smiling, but irritation began to show through her mask of self-confidence. She didn't like that her trained monkey was turning out to be smarter than her lawyers. Leo took a deep breath, preparing to continue, and suddenly his finger froze. He noticed something on the page that had escaped the others' attention, a paragraph printed in small, barely visible font at the very bottom of the page. He ran his finger over the lines, making sure he wasn't mistaken. The characters formed a terrifying picture. The words arranged themselves clearly in his mind. His voice filled the hall again, but now it sounded louder and more alarming. "The company reserves the right to terminate the contract unilaterally in the event of the discovery of hidden debts." A strange, ringing silence hung over the table. Several people turned to look at Victoria. This line was not a minor detail. It clearly indicated an inequality between the parties. Even Vance, who prided himself on his attention to detail, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He hadn't expected a janitor to understand the contract better than he did. "A coincidence," David grumbled, trying to diffuse the tension. He just guessed. The laughter sounded hollow, but Leo didn't stop. He read on, and every word was a blow. "The signatory waives the right to sue under local jurisdiction and transfers all personal assets as collateral." The glasses on the tables remained still. Some guests lowered their eyes, ashamed of how they had laughed just 5 minutes ago. Sophia looked at Victoria, not believing her ears. Each new sentence was an invisible crack in the Iron Lady's armor. Though she still maintained that same frozen performative smile, the mask was beginning to crumble. "Fine," Victoria Blackwood said, her voice now harder. It had lost its playfulness. Continue. I want to hear everything." Leo took a deep breath. He could feel every gaze stabbing into him like a knife, but something stronger than fear had awakened within him. He was no longer just translating for money or an argument. He was exposing a lie. He saw Mr. Chen's face turn red, his hands clenching into fists. The boy understood that he was making very dangerous enemies right now, but he couldn't stop. "In the event of a dispute, the sole language of arbitration shall be the Fujian dialect," he said evenly. The translation flowed like a river. A wave of anxious whispers swept through the room. Some of the guests, experienced businessmen, immediately understood what that meant. A contract written this way left anyone who didn't speak this rare dialect defenseless. It was a trap. Victoria tapped her manicured fingers on the table irritably. "Is that all you've got? Just repeating what's written?" Panic, which she tried to hide behind aggression, was audible in her voice. Leo gave her a calm, mature look that no one expected from a teenager in a dirty uniform. "I'm not repeating, ma'am," he said firmly. "I'm explaining. This contract forces you to accept terms that will destroy you. It strips you of the right to defend yourself in your own language. They don't want to take 20%. They want to take everything." An instant, heavy, and suffocating silence fell upon the room. The audacity to say such a thing seemed unthinkable. Sophia covered her mouth with her hand, astonished. The guests exchanged glances. No one dared to laugh. For the first time that evening, Victoria's laughter found no echo. The hall was no longer an arena for a cruel joke. It had turned into an impromptu courtroom. Mr. Chen couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up from his seat, knocking over his chair. "Lies!" he shouted in broken English, spittle flying from his mouth. "This boy is lying. He knows nothing. He just wants the money you put on the table. Victoria, this is an insult. I will not let some sewer rat teach me about business." He looked menacing. His two bodyguards took a step toward Leo. The boy instinctively flinched, stepping back. Fear once again gripped his heart. He was just a child against powerful adult men. Victoria looked at Chen, then at Leo. A battle was raging in her head. Pride screamed at her to throw the boy out and sign the deal to save her company from tomorrow's bankruptcy. But her intuition, the very intuition that had helped her build an empire, whispered that the boy was telling the truth. Victoria's gaze hardened. She realized she was losing control of the situation. "Stay," she ordered the guards. Her voice cracked like a whip. The Chinese men froze. She turned to Leo. There was no mockery in her eyes now. There was cold calculation. "All right, little rat," she said. "Since you think you're so smart, let's see if you can handle the final text. If you get a single word wrong, I'll turn you over to the police for fraud." She leaned toward Victor Vance, who with trembling hands opened another folder and placed a new sheet in front of Leo, an addendum to the contract. It was a solid paragraph of the most complex legal jargon, printed in characters that merged into a single black mass. It was a labyrinth designed to break any translator. The guests held their breath. The game was getting tougher. The stakes had risen to the sky. Victoria slammed her palm on the table. The sound echoed in the silence like a gunshot. "If you're really such a genius," she said with a crooked smirk, "translate this. There are no simple phrases here. This is where we find out who's smart and who was born to be a servant." An anxious murmur went through the hall. Someone shook their head, acknowledging that things had gone too far. This was bullying a child, but no one dared to intervene. Everyone feared Blackwood's wrath. Leo took the sheet. His hands were shaking, and the paper rustled in the silence. The lines blurred into a tangle of terms. Force majeure, indemnification. The pressure was crushing his chest. He felt like he was about to faint. Maria, the waitress, took a step forward to protect him, but stopped. Meeting the boy's firm gaze, she realized he didn't need pity. He needed to prove his truth. David Channing laughed loudly, trying to please his boss. "See? He's speechless. That's what happens when you pretend to be a prodigy. Go home, boy, before it's too late." Leo looked directly at him. He didn't answer, but his silence was louder than any words. He took another deep breath, closed his eyes for a second, and pictured his mother's face. If he gave up, they would be thrown out onto the street tomorrow. He opened his eyes. The characters stopped dancing. They lined up in a clear row. "Let's begin," he whispered to himself. His voice trembled at first, but it already held an inner strength that made everyone fall silent. "In the event of a company merger or transfer of assets," he began to translate, the silence in the hall became thick, like the air before a storm. No one dared to smirk. Sophia pressed a hand to her chest, deeply moved. Leo's voice no longer sounded like that of a frightened child. It was the voice of a professional. Victor Vance frowned, checking his tablet. He realized this was no coincidence. The boy truly understood the text better than he did. But Victoria wasn't going to back down. Her pride was wounded. "That's just the beginning," she spat venomously. "Read on. The most important part is at the bottom." Leo lowered his eyes and continued. "Party B, the investor, shall not be liable for any financial obligations of Party A, the owner, incurred prior to the moment of signing." The room froze. The woman everyone considered to be in charge was losing her empire before their very eyes, without even realizing it. Leo raised his head. Breathing heavily, he looked at Chen. The Chinese man was pale. The boy continued, raising his voice, "Including, but not limited to, debts to banks, tax authorities, and employees. All liability is placed personally on Victoria Blackwood." This was the end. Victoria gripped her glass so tightly that the crystal creaked and cracked. Shards fell onto the table, but she didn't even notice the cut on her finger. She couldn't bear the thought that the boy she considered insignificant had, in front of everyone, exposed a deception that could have cost her her life. Leo slowly lowered the sheet. His breath was ragged, as if he had had to climb Mount Everest for every word. There was an absolute ringing silence in the hall. Only a drop of blood from Victoria's finger fell onto the white tablecloth, blooming into a red stain, much like the wine itself. All eyes were on the boy. In some, there was admiration. In others, shame. In a third group, primal fear. No one could deny the obvious. This child in dirty sneakers had just destroyed a multi-million-dollar deal. Victoria Blackwood was not going to give up so easily. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, and a crooked, terrifying smile appeared on her lips. "Tell the truth," she said in a low, harsh voice that sent shivers down everyone's spine. "Who helped you? Who sent you? Competitors? Are you a spy?" Leo looked her directly in the eye. His hands were still trembling with adrenaline, but there was no fear left in his gaze, only exhaustion and dignity. "No one helped me," he said quietly. David laughed nervously. "Oh, come on. Who's going to believe a 13-year-old janitor understands legal terms in Chinese? That's a fairy tale for idiots." Someone else awkwardly joined the laughter, but it quickly died out. Most sat in silence, awaiting the outcome. Leo pressed his lips together, lowered his eyes for a moment, remembering his father, and said evenly so that everyone in the room could hear, "My father was an ambassador. I grew up in Beijing. I've been learning this language since I was 3, while you were learning how to properly choose your ties." Those words hit like a thunderclap. A whisper rippled through the hall. Sophia's eyes widened in amazement, and Victor Vance took off his glasses as if to make sure he hadn't misheard. The son of a diplomat, here, with a mop in his hands. Victoria laughed a dry, venomous laugh. It sounded like the cracking of breaking ice. "The son of an ambassador, are you? And when did you trade diplomatic receptions for the dirty toilets in my hotel?" Leo swallowed hard. The question cut deep, but there was no turning back. He had to tell the truth to be heard. "My dad died in an accident 3 years ago," he said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "My mom got sick from grief. The money ran out. The medicine is expensive. I dropped out of school and took any job I could so she wouldn't die. I mop your floors not because I'm stupid, but because I love my mom." A heavy silence filled the hall. The guests exchanged glances. Someone lowered their head, hiding their eyes. Suddenly, this insignificant little janitor was a person with a heart full of sacrifice and pain, a heart bigger than all the millionaires in that room combined. Sophia's voice trembled as she broke the silence. "Victoria, that doesn't make him a liar. It makes him a hero." But Mr. Chen was not going to give up. He realized he was losing control of the situation. His face turned purple with rage. He decided to go on the attack, using his power and authority. He slowly approached the boy, looming over him like a cliff. "You filthy little liar," he hissed, spittle flying. "Victoria, do you believe this child's fairy tales? He's a spy for your competitors. Look at him. He's a beggar. He'll do anything for a piece of bread. Do you believe him or me, your partner with a global reputation, with whom you've worked for 10 years? He snatched the paper from Leo's hands and tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper was like a gunshot. "The deal is off," Chen screamed. "I will not be insulted. We are leaving, and tomorrow morning your company will be destroyed." Victoria hesitated. Fear gripped her heart again. Bankruptcy was real. And the boy, what if he really had made it all up? What if this was a mistake? Leo saw the doubt in Victoria's eyes. He realized he was losing. He needed proof. Ironclad proof. And then he remembered the conversation in the restroom. He took a step forward, placing himself between Victoria and the enraged Chinese man. "I'm not lying," Leo shouted, looking directly into Chen's eyes. "I heard you half an hour ago in the service restroom." Chen froze. His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "You were there with your assistant," Leo continued, raising his voice. "You were laughing. You said this contract was toilet paper." The room gasped. "You said," Leo switched to flawless Chinese, mimicking Chen's intonation, "as soon as that stupid, arrogant woman signs, we'll transfer all the assets to Hong Kong. We specifically arranged the accident downtown so her translator wouldn't show up." Chen recoiled as if he had been slapped. The color drained from his face instantly, replaced by a deathly pallor. Only 2 people in the world knew about that conversation. This was proof that couldn't be faked or invented. Victoria saw the fear in her partner's eyes, and in that moment, the veil lifted. She understood everything. She slowly walked to the table, picked up a glass of water, and without a word, threw its contents directly into Mr. Chen's face. "Out," she said quietly. "You're making a mistake," Chen began, wiping his wet face. "Out!" she screamed so loudly the windows rattled. "If you are not gone in 1 minute, my lawyer will send the security camera footage to Interpol and the Chinese embassy. I will destroy your reputation. I will grind you into dust." Leo added in Chinese, "And don't forget, Mr. Chen, my father used to say that in China, they really don't like businessmen who bring shame to the nation. You'd better run." The threat worked instantly. Chen knew the game was over. With curses, pushing each other, the Chinese delegation hastily left the hall. The door slammed shut, leaving behind only the scent of expensive cologne and fear. All that remained was silence, and Leo and Victoria. The boy stood with his hands at his sides. The adrenaline was fading, and he once again felt like just a small, tired janitor in a uniform that was too big. He looked at the torn contract on the floor. He had saved her. But what now? He would be fired. He bent down to pick up his dirty rag. I'll clean up the water, ma'am," he said quietly, "and then I'll leave. I'm sorry for the trouble." "Leave the rag." Victoria's voice was trembling. She walked over to him. Everyone in the room, waiters, managers, guests, watched them, holding their breath. The Iron Lady, feared by the entire city, stood before a child in dirty sneakers. From her eyes, always dry and cold, tears were flowing. Her mascara was smudged, but she didn't care. She slowly knelt before him, right on the dirty, wet floor he used to mop. Now their eyes were on the same level. She took his small, red, work-roughened hands in her own manicured palms, adorned with diamonds. "Forgive me," she whispered. "Please, forgive me. I was blind. I was a monster." Leo was flustered. He had never seen an adult cry like that. "Please, get up. You'll stain your $5,000 dress." "To hell with the dress," she cried, laughing through her sobs. "To hell with the shoes. To hell with the money. It's all trash. You are the only real thing in this room. You saved me, Leo. You saved my children from poverty, and I made you crawl." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and looked at the table where the stack of money still lay. $10,000. "I promised you money," she said firmly. Leo's heart stopped. Could it be? "But I'm not giving you this money," Victoria continued. Leo lowered his head. Of course, there would be no miracle. I'm not giving it to you because it's a handout, Victoria said, rising and pulling the boy up with her. As of this moment, you are fired as a janitor. You are hired. You will be my personal consultant. Your salary will be such that you will never have to count pennies again. She turned to her assistant. Andrew, call Sterling Clinic. Right now. Have them send an ambulance to Leo's address. His mother needs to be moved to a VIP room immediately. Pay for the best doctors, the best medicine, whatever it takes. Send the bill to me. Then she looked at Leo. And I will pay for your education. Harvard, Oxford, Yale, you choose. A talent like yours shouldn't be wasted with a mop in your hands. Leo couldn't hold back. He rushed to her and hugged her. Burying his face in the expensive dress that smelled of wine and tears, the tough businesswoman hugged the little boy back tightly, like a mother hugging her son. The hall erupted in applause. People rose from their seats. They were applauding not a business deal, but the humanity that had returned to this cold room. Manager Peterson tried to slip out unnoticed through a service entrance, but Victoria's voice stopped him like a gunshot. "Peterson!" The manager froze, his head sinking into his shoulders. "Hand over your pass," she said in an icy tone. "You're fired, and if I find out you ever humiliate another staff member anywhere in this city, I will make sure you won't even get a job cleaning sewers. Get out." That same evening, as Leo drove up to his old building in Victoria's black limousine, he witnessed a miracle. It wasn't the police or an angry landlord waiting at the entrance. It was a modern ambulance. Medics were carefully carrying his mother out on a stretcher, covered with a warm blanket. "What's happening?" he asked, frightened. "Don't worry, son." His mother was smiling for the first time in months, and a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. "They called me, said my treatment is fully paid for. They're taking us to a sanatorium." Leo looked up at the black winter sky. Snowflakes fell on his face, mixing with tears of joy. He took out his phone and dialed the landlord's number, Mr. Henderson. "Hello, got the money?" the man barked rudely. "Mr. Henderson," Leo said, his voice no longer holding fear, only the calm strength of a man. "I've just transferred the debt and payment for the next 6 months. Take the money and never, do you hear me? Never dare to kick our door again. We're moving." He hung up and got into the limousine, holding his mother's hand. That night, the janitor boy died. An heir to an empire was born. 5 years passed. New York had changed, but the Monarch Grand Hotel remained the same symbol of luxury. Into the very same VIP room walked 2 people. A woman in an elegant, light-colored suit walked with a confident stride, but there was no ice in her eyes now. She smiled at the staff, greeting the waiters by name. It was Victoria Blackwood. Beside her walked a tall, handsome young man. He was 18. He wore a perfectly tailored dark blue suit, and on his lapel gleamed the pin of a Peking University graduate. It was Leo Martinez. They approached the table, the very same table where, 5 years ago, wine was spilled and a life was nearly shattered. "Do you remember that day?" Victoria asked, looking at the panoramic window. "Like it was yesterday," Leo smiled. "I still owe you for the dry cleaning of those shoes." Victoria laughed. "You've repaid that debt 1,000 times over, Leo. Thanks to your advice, we've opened branches in Shanghai and Tokyo. You're the best partner I've ever had." Leo looked at his hands. They were no longer rough and red. Now they were the hands of a man who holds a pen, signing $1,000,000 contracts. But he never forgot the weight of a mop. "You know," Victoria said quietly, "I didn't just save my money that day. I saved my soul. You taught me that a person's greatness isn't measured by the brand of their clothes, but by how they act when they think no one is watching." At that moment, a new intern approached them, a young man who dropped a folder of papers in fright. He began to apologize profusely, expecting to be yelled at and fired. Victoria and Leo exchanged a look. Leo bent down, picked up the folder, and handed it to the young man. "It's okay," he said in Chinese, then translated to English. "Don't be afraid of mistakes. Be afraid of losing your humanity. What's your name?" The young man smiled, and the fear left his eyes. This story became a legend. It reminds us that you should never judge a book by its cover. Beneath a janitor's dirty uniform may hide a genius who will save your life. And beneath an expensive suit, an emptiness. And most importantly, kindness is the only language that everyone understands and for which no translator is needed. If this story touched your heart, please support us with a like. Write in the comments if you believe that one good deed can change a destiny. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Many more amazing stories are ahead. Thank you for being with us.